A young man named Yoichi lay fast asleep in his room, completely unaware of the presence beside him. Kneeling quietly at his bedside, a woman watched him for a moment with a faint smile. Then, without warning, she reached out and pinched his nose shut. Within seconds, Yoichi began to struggle for air. His body twitched, his brows furrowed, and suddenly he jolted awake. His eyes shot open in shock, only to find her face just inches from his own. The woman smiled warmly and greeted him, calling out his name. She casually told him it was already late in the morning and that he should get up. If he didn't, she warned, she wouldn't hesitate to prank him again. Still disoriented from the abrupt wake-up, Yoichi instinctively almost called her mom, but stopped himself mid-word and corrected it to ma'am. The woman, Hana, didn't look pleased. She reminded him that when they were at home, she had already told him to call her mom. Though she wasn't his real mother, she had taken on that role in his life, and she clearly expected him to acknowledge it. With that, Hana stood up and left the room, telling him to settle himself before coming out to join her for breakfast. What made the situation even stranger was that Yoichi had only been staying at Hana's place since the day before. It was the spring of his first year in university, what should have been the exciting start of a new chapter. Instead, it turned into a disaster almost immediately. Just 1 month into campus life, his dormitory had burned down completely. The cause? Sparks from a refrigerator's faulty compressor had ignited leaked oil on another resident on the same floor. In a matter of hours, Yoichi had lost his place to live. Standing outside with the other displaced residents, still trying to process what had happened, Yoichi received a call from a friend. At first, it sounded like he might have a place to stay, but that hope quickly faded. The friend hesitated, then explained that it wouldn't work out. Instead, he suggested something else. Yoichi could temporarily stay at his parents' house, which was located in the same prefecture and not too far from the university. With no better options, Yoichi agreed. Not long after, he arrived at the location, and what he saw completely caught him off guard. Instead of a typical suburban home, the place turned out to be a guest house tucked away deep in the countryside. The shift in scenery was almost surreal. Just 3 train stations away from his old apartment, barely a 20-minute bus ride, and yet it felt like a completely different world. And right in front of the guest house, stretching endlessly into the horizon, was the Pacific Ocean. As Yoichi stepped inside the guest house, he was immediately greeted by an incredibly beautiful woman wearing glasses. To his surprise, she gracefully knelt on the floor in front of him, her posture elegant and respectful, almost as if she were welcoming a lover returning home. Yoichi froze on the spot, completely caught off guard. Thinking there had been some kind of misunderstanding, he quickly told her she must have mistaken him for someone else. But the woman, Hana, suddenly burst into laughter. She admitted it was all just a prank and teasingly asked if he had been moved by her performance. Still processing what just happened, Yoichi couldn't help but stare. Hana had a striking tan complexion and a youthful appearance that made her hard to read. For a moment, he even wondered if she was just a part-time worker at the guest house. Sensing his confusion, Hana casually explained that she had already heard about a situation. Realizing he hadn't properly introduced himself yet, Yoichi quickly apologized and bowed slightly. He introduced himself as Yoichi, a friend of Itsuki, the one who had referred him to this place, and sincerely thanked her for allowing him to stay on such short notice. Hana seemed amused by his politeness. With a soft smile, she welcomed him inside and officially invited him to stay at the guest house. As they walked further in, she asked about the fire and whether anyone had been injured. Yoichi simply nodded, still a bit shaken from everything that had happened. She then guided him down a hallway lined with rooms. Since there weren't many guests at the moment, she told him he was free to use one of the rooms and stay there for the time being. It was then that she casually introduced herself as the landlady of the guest house. That revelation completely surprised Yoichi. He had always assumed that Itsuki's mother was the landlady, but the woman standing in front of him looked far too young. As if reading his thoughts, Hana dropped another unexpected detail. She was in fact Itsuki's mother. Yoichi was stunned. She was only 34 years old, a young mother and the owner of an entire guest house. But just as he began to process that, Hana broke into another playful grin and flipped the story again. She joked that she hadn't actually given birth to anyone, and since Itsuki's real parents weren't around, she was simply acting as the parent for now. Yoichi didn't know what to believe anymore. All he could do was nod quietly, still confused by her teasing nature. At that moment, his phone rang. It was his own mother, most likely informed by the university about the dormitory fire. Yoichi glanced at the screen, but chose not to pick up just yet. Instead, Hana led him into a spacious room and told him he could stay there. Although the room looked a bit old, it was clean and well-maintained. She pointed out that he was free to use the TV and refrigerator whenever he liked. There was only one rule: no noise after 9 p.m. She also informed him that meals would be served starting at 6 p.m. so he could plan to take his bath afterward. With everything explained, Hana excused herself, mentioning that she still had work to do, leaving Yoichi alone in his new, unfamiliar living space. Not long after settling into the room, Yoichi's phone rang again. This time, it was his friend Itsuki calling. Yoichi quickly picked up and got straight to the point. He admitted that he hadn't expected the place to be a guest house at all, and because of that, he was planning to leave the very next day. Staying any longer just didn't feel right to him. But Itsuki didn't seem surprised. Instead, he casually told Yoichi that he already knew about his preferences, especially his soft spot for girls who were kind to otaku. Even if that kind of girl sounded unrealistic, Itsuki insisted that someone exactly like that existed, and she was right there in the guest house. Yoichi was caught off guard. Itsuki then added that he would send a picture of the woman later so Yoichi could see for himself. The moment the photo arrived, Yoichi immediately got up and went looking for Hana. He eventually found her in the bathroom area, kneeling down as she scrubbed the floor. She noticed him right away and looked up with a smile, asking if he wanted to take a bath first. She apologized, saying she hadn't finished cleaning yet, and jokingly blamed herself for being lazy. Yoichi shook his head and politely declined. He said he could bathe later, and instead offered to help her clean. Of course, helping wasn't his only reason. He wanted to ask her about the woman in the picture, but at the same time, he genuinely felt the need to show some gratitude for letting him stay. On top of that, he wasn't used to interacting with someone older than him like this. Knowing she was his friend's aunt only made him feel more hesitant. So he quietly helped her clean instead. After they finished, Hana brought out an impressive spread of seafood dishes for him. The sight alone made Yoichi feel uneasy. He hesitated, clearly embarrassed, and admitted that he couldn't possibly afford something like this. He added that if he had known he would be staying at a guest house, he would at least brought money for accommodation. But Hana simply waved it off. She told him not to worry about it at all. It was rare for Itsuki to bring a friend over, so the least she could do was take care of him properly during his stay. Hearing that, Yoichi felt a wave of relief and gratitude. As he took his first bite, his eyes widened. The food was incredibly delicious. With each bite, he began to relax more and more. The warm meal, combined with Hana's easygoing presence, made him feel surprisingly comfortable, almost like he belonged there. But just as he was settling in, his phone rang again. It was his mother. Yoichi glanced at the screen, clearly reluctant to answer. He mumbled an excuse about being in the middle of eating and tried to ignore it. Before he could react, Hana reached over and picked up the call herself. Yoichi froze. With a calm and friendly tone, Hana introduced herself as the mother of Yoichi's friend and explained the situation, that Yoichi was staying with her after the dormitory fire. She even added a small excuse, saying he couldn't come to the phone at the moment. What surprised Yoichi even more was how naturally the conversation flowed. Hana quickly grew friendly with his mother, speaking as if they had known each other for a long time. Yoichi could only sit there stunned as he watched everything unfold right in front of him. Hana gently handed the phone back to Yoichi, mentioning that his mother sounded very worried about him. For a moment, Yoichi stayed silent. Then, as if something inside him finally gave in, he began to explain. He admitted that his parents had always been kind and supportive. They had done everything they could for him. But when he entered high school, things started to fall apart. He couldn't keep up with his studies, and little by little, the gap between him and their expectations began to grow. That gap turned into guilt. In the end, he failed to get into his first-choice university. Unable to face his parents, Yoichi ran away from home in Tokyo and chose a university far out in the countryside instead. And now, he had lost even that stability. With a bitter smile, he admitted that his parents would probably try to support him again after hearing about the fire, but he couldn't accept it anymore. He didn't want to keep being a burden to them. Before he could say anything else, Hana suddenly pulled him into a gentle embrace. Yoichi froze, completely caught off guard. In a soft, comforting voice, Hana began to speak. She explained that the guest house used to be just a regular home, not some grand or luxurious place. The meals might be simple and local, not anything extravagant, but that was exactly what made it special. It felt like home, a place where he didn't have to worry, a place that was warm, familiar, and safe. She told him that if he didn't have anywhere else to go, he was more than welcome to stay here. This place could be his home, and if he wanted, he could even call her Mom. If that felt too embarrassing, she added with a small smile, he could just call her Hana, no need for any formalities. Yoichi stood there in silence, overwhelmed. After a brief pause, he made his choice. Mom. The word slipped out quietly, but it carried weight. After finishing his meal, Yoichi tried to shift the mood and asked if there were any other workers at the guest house. Hana replied that there were only 3 people running the place, herself and her parents. That reminded Yoichi of something. He pulled out his phone and showed her the picture Itsuki had sent him. Curious, he asked if she knew the girl in the photo, mentioning that he had been told she was also staying at the guest house. The moment Hana saw the image, her expression changed slightly. Just for a second, she looked surprised. Calmly, she asked where he got the photo. Yoichi explained it came from his friend and quickly added that there wasn't any deeper meaning behind it. Hana then revealed the truth. The girl in the picture was actually her niece, and she's still in high school. She only came to help at the guest house during long vacations, so she wasn't around at the moment. That caught Yoichi off guard. Looking between Hana and the photo again, he pointed out how similar they looked. There definitely was a resemblance. Hana didn't deny it. Instead, she quietly began gathering the dishes. As she worked, she casually mentioned how boring the countryside could be, especially with so few young people around. She told him he could relax and take things easy here until he found a new place to stay. With that, she headed toward the door. But just before leaving, she turned back for a brief moment. Sticking out her tongue playfully, she revealed a small piercing exactly like the one the girl in the photo had. Then, without another word, Hana smiled and closed the door behind her. Yoichi sat quietly on his futon, absent-mindedly scrolling through his phone. The more he swiped, the more his mood sank. His social media feed was flooded with posts from his university friends, smiling photos of them living with their girlfriends, cooking meals together, watching movies late at night, and enjoying the kind of life he had once imagined for himself. Each image felt like a reminder of what he didn't have. A dull frustration began to build inside him. He had always wanted a girlfriend too, but things never worked out that way. And now, with his dorm burned down right before the semester truly began, everything had only gotten worse. If that fire hadn't happened, maybe things would be different. Maybe he'd be living on his own like everyone else. Maybe he'd have someone by his side. Instead, he was here, stuck in a quiet countryside guest house, watching everyone else move forward while he felt left behind. Lost in those thoughts, Yoichi didn't notice Hana quietly approaching from behind. Her sudden voice broke the silence, startling him. She leaned slightly closer, casually asking what couples who lived alone actually did together. Since she had only studied up to high school, she admitted she didn't really understand what university life was like. After graduating, she had taken over the guest house and devoted herself to running it, while also raising Itsuki. Then, almost as an afterthought, she asked Yoichi if he wasn't planning to go to school. He hesitated, then simply replied that he didn't feel like going. Hana didn't press him. Instead, she suggested something unexpected. He should come with her to the sea. Not long after, they arrived at the shoreline. The vast ocean stretched endlessly before them, waves rolling in under the bright sky. Then, as casually as ever, Hana asked him to stand guard while she changed behind a small boulder. Yoichi blinked in confusion. The request felt strange. After all, she was his friend's aunt, and ever since they met, she had been unusually open and familiar with him. Still, he pushed those thoughts aside and agreed, turning his back and keeping watch, trying not to overthink the situation. A few minutes later, Hana stepped out from behind the rock, now dressed in a wetsuit. She looked completely at ease. As she prepared her gear, Yoichi suddenly realized something. The sunburn she had mentioned earlier wasn't from relaxing under the sun, it was from spending long hours in the wetsuit out at sea. Before he could say anything, Hana moved. With smooth, confident motions, she dove straight into the water. Yoichi watched in quiet amazement. Her movements were swift and natural, like she belonged there. She swam effortlessly, catching fish and gathering seafood as if it were second nature. Every now and then she would resurface, sometimes splashing water playfully in his direction or calling out to him with a teasing grin. The tension that had been weighing on Yoichi earlier slowly began to fade. For the first time in a while, he found himself simply watching and feeling a little lighter. After some time, the two of them settled down on the rocks by the shore. Hana casually began slicing up the freshly caught abalone, handing Yoichi a piece to try. The taste caught him off guard. It was incredibly fresh. simple yet delicious in a way he hadn't experienced before. As he ate, he realized he was actually enjoying himself. The sound of the waves, the ocean breeze, and the quiet atmosphere slowly eased the tension that had been weighing on him since morning. Hana watched him closely, a satisfied smile forming on her lips as she noticed the change in his expression. She pointed out how much more relaxed he seemed now. Then, in a gentle but encouraging tone, she suggested that if he was feeling better, he should consider going back to class. Even if he ended up returning late at night, she assured him that she would take responsibility for him and make sure he was taken care of. At that moment, everything clicked for Yoichi. Bringing him to the sea, preparing fresh food, creating this calm, peaceful space, it had all been for his sake. She had been trying to help him recover, not just physically, but emotionally as well. Feeling a renewed sense of determination, Yoichi decided to return to school. He couldn't ignore the effort Hana had put in for him. When he finally arrived on campus, however, things didn't go quite as he expected. He received a message from Itsuki saying he wouldn't be attending class that day. Yoichi couldn't hide his disappointment. He had been hoping to see a familiar face after everything. As he made his way toward the sociology department, still lost in thought, someone suddenly called out to him. A girl he had never met before approached him with a friendly smile. She asked if he was part of the sociology department. When he confirmed, she told him about a small get-together happening later that evening at 7 p.m., organized with a few people from her class. Then she asked if he'd like to join. For a moment, Yoichi's heart lifted. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd been waiting for, a chance to meet new people, make friends, and finally feel like part of campus life. And the fact that girls would be there only made it more exciting. But that excitement didn't last long. Reality quickly set in. The guest house was far from campus, and the shuttle ride alone took nearly 2 hours. By the time he made it back, it'd already be late, and he'd likely be exhausted. The distance made everything complicated. After thinking it over, Yoichi felt his excitement slowly fade. As much as he wanted to go, it just wasn't practical. In the end, he forced a small smile and politely turned down the invitation, letting the opportunity slip through his fingers. Yoichi eventually made his way back to the guest house, but the heavy feeling still lingered. Missing the get-together kept replaying in his mind. It wasn't just about a party. It had been a chance to finally connect with people, maybe even get closer to some of the girls in his class. And now, that opportunity was gone. Hana noticed his mood the moment he walked in. At first, she wondered if something was wrong with the food she had prepared earlier. But when she asked, Yoichi shook his head and opened up about what was really bothering him. He admitted that he was upset about missing the chance to socialize. He had hoped to make friends, to feel like he belonged, and maybe even meet someone special. Instead, he felt like he was back to square one, isolated all over again. Hana listened quietly, a faint smile on her face. When he finished, she nodded as if she understood completely. Then, in a light, playful tone, she told him not to worry. When she finished her work, she would keep him company. It wasn't anything grand, but her words eased his mind a little, and she meant it. Later that evening, after wrapping up her tasks, Hana took Yoichi out to a small local place called a Snack, a cozy bar known for drinks and casual, lively conversations. Yoichi hesitated the moment they arrived. He knew he was still underage, and stepping into a place that served alcohol made him uneasy. He voiced his concern, clearly reluctant to go inside. But Hana, as carefree as ever, simply laughed and gave him a playful push forward, brushing off his worries as if they were nothing. Before he knew it, he was inside. The atmosphere was completely different from what he expected. The room buzzed with energy, people chatting loudly, glasses clinking, and laughter echoing through the space. It felt warm, welcoming, almost overwhelming. As soon as they entered, a group of older men greeted Hana enthusiastically. It was obvious they knew her well. Some of them even invited her to join their table for drinks. But Hana politely declined, smiling as she gestured toward Yoichi, making it clear she wasn't alone. They made their way to the counter, where a waitress stood waiting. Hana casually ordered alcohol, but the waitress quickly refused, pointing out that Yoichi looked like a minor. Instead, they served them oolong tea. Hana laughed it off and introduced the waitress as Ren, an old friend from her high school days. She added that Ren was especially good at giving advice. Yoichi blinked in surprise. For some reason, he had always imagined snack bar waitresses to be older, more mature women. But Ren looked young, much closer to Hana's age than he expected. Without wasting time, Ren turned her attention to Yoichi and gave him a piece of advice. If he wanted to date someone in the future, she said, the most important qualities were kindness and compassion. Yoichi tilted his head slightly, surprised by how simple and vague it sounded. Before he could think too much about it, Ren suddenly asked why he was sitting so far away from Hana.
Caught off guard, Yuichi awkwardly explained that the seats were too close together. If he sat any nearer, their bodies might touch, and that didn't feel appropriate to him. His answer only made the situation feel even more awkward.
Hana suddenly turned to Yoichi with a curious look and asked him what he thought was the most important element in love. Caught off guard, Yoichi answered honestly. It was the face. For a moment, there was silence, and then Hana burst into laughter. She called his answer naive, though not entirely wrong. According to her, appearance might be what draws someone in at first. That was probably why he had been so interested in the girl from the photo earlier. Yoichi immediately blushed, fumbling as he tried to deny it. Hana only smiled knowingly. She then admitted that she didn't really know much about Itsuki's school life. Taking the opportunity, Yoichi offered to share what he knew, how students spent their time at university, the kind of social lives they had. Hana listened with interest before making an unexpected proposal. In exchange, she said she would teach him about women. Before Yoichi could fully process what she meant, Hana leaned in closer. With a teasing confidence, she revealed a glimpse of herself that instantly caught him off guard. Yoichi's face turned bright red, and he wasn't the only one reacting. Even some of the older men in the bar couldn't help but glance over. Hana laughed at his reaction, clearly amused. Seeing how flustered he was, she teased him further. If he really wanted a girlfriend, she said, he should start by looking into a woman's eyes, not just focusing on appearances. From the side, Ren chimed in with a playful remark. Honestly, she said, Yoichi might already be having a better time than most university students. After all, he had a woman like Hana taking care of him. Later that night, Yoichi returned to the guest house with his thoughts in complete disarray. Lying on his futon, he found himself scrolling through the photos Hana had casually taken on his phone earlier. He couldn't stop looking at them. And then, something caught his attention. There was a small detail, a mole, in the exact same place as the girl from the picture Itsuki had sent him. Yoichi froze. A thought slowly crept into his mind. Could it be that the woman from the photo and Hana were actually the same person? If that was true, then why had she lied and said it was her niece? Confusion filled his head. Ever since arriving at the guest house, Hana had constantly thrown him off balance. His heart wouldn't stop reacting to her presence, and now everything felt even more complicated. He knew this was someone else's home, someone older, someone in a completely different position from him. If their roles were reversed, he thought, he would probably find it uncomfortable, even wrong. And yet, despite all that, he couldn't ignore how he felt. Trying to settle his thoughts, Yoichi convinced himself that maybe he didn't need to overthink it so much. But things only became more awkward. By the third night, Yoichi experienced something he hadn't before, his first wet dream. The next morning, Hana somehow already knew. To his surprise, she didn't tease him or make a big deal out of it. Instead, she spoke casually, telling him it was completely normal, a natural part of being a healthy young man, nothing to be ashamed of. Even so, Yoichi couldn't help but feel embarrassed. To him, it only made him feel more like a loser.
Later on, Yoichi found himself in an awkward situation, quietly washing his briefs in the bathroom, hoping no one would notice. He couldn't help but regret his earlier restraint, thinking that maybe it would have been easier if he had just ignored his conscience and dealt with his feelings privately. But of course, Hana noticed. She walked in on him mid-task, immediately understanding what was going on. Instead of reacting harshly, she spoke casually, telling him he didn't need to hold back over something like that. There was no need to feel embarrassed just because it was someone else's house. In fact, she admitted she was already used to dealing with things like this. That only made Yoichi more shocked. Seeing his reaction, Hana added that she had actually been planning to help with his laundry and clothes anyway. Since the situation had already come up, she figured she might as well take care of it. Without hesitation, she offered to help wash his clothes, and even suggested that he skip classes for the day so they could go out and buy whatever he needed. Yoichi didn't know how to respond, but somehow he found himself going along with it. Later, while they were heading back from the store, his phone rang again. It was his mother. She sounded worried, saying she wanted to come visit him and bring some clothes, but Yoichi quickly reassured her, explaining that he had already bought new ones and would be attending classes as usual. He also mentioned that Hana was busy, subtly discouraging the idea of a visit. His mother still seemed eager to come and meet Hana, but Yoichi made up excuses. The truth was, he didn't want her coming to the guest house, not like this. If she were to visit, he wanted it to be when he had his own place, somewhere he could properly welcome her. That thought lingered.
For the first time, Yoichi seriously considered looking for a new place to stay. He knew he couldn't rely on Hana forever. No matter how comfortable things felt, he was still just a guest. And then there was that other issue. The woman from the photo, the one who looked exactly like Hana. If he hadn't seen that, maybe he wouldn't be so conflicted right now. But with everything piling up, his confusion, his feelings, even the embarrassment from his recent experiences, he felt like he was reaching a limit. He made up his mind. If he confirmed that the woman from the photo was actually the real landlady, then he would leave the very next day. With that thought in mind, Yoichi returned from school later that day. As he stepped inside, he noticed Hana attending to some guests. But what happened next completely caught him off guard. With a playful tone, Hana introduced Yoichi to the guests as her boyfriend. Yoichi's brain froze. He immediately denied it, flustered and embarrassed. Realizing she had gone too far, Hana quickly laughed it off and told the guests she was just joking. Then, as if nothing had happened, she smoothly shifted back into her role as the landlady, welcoming them warmly and guiding them to their rooms. Later, she served them food and drinks, and the guests were clearly impressed. They praised the quality, enjoying both the meal and the atmosphere. Hana even sat down with them to celebrate their newly married life. Watching from a distance, Yoichi felt something stir inside him, something he didn't quite understand. He didn't like it. The way Hana laughed with them, the way she easily connected, even calling them by nicknames as if they had known each other for years, it made him uneasy. Before he realized it, that uneasy feeling had already started to grow.
Hana sat with the guests, chatting casually as the conversation shifted to the ring the woman had received from her husband. The newlywed proudly showed it off, explaining how women treasured gifts from their loved ones and wanted to keep them safe for as long as possible, even worrying about something as small as scratches. Listening to her, Hana seemed to understand something. It became clear that the couple had chosen this guest house after hearing good reviews, not just about the place itself, but about Hana and the warm, welcoming atmosphere she created with her presence. Meanwhile, Yoichi had already retreated to his room. Lying down, he found himself thinking about her again. The way she interacted with people, the way she effortlessly closed the distance even with strangers, it all felt so natural. The more he thought about it, the more he realized she had been on his mind the entire day. Just then, he heard her voice from outside. Hana casually announced that she was coming in, but before Yoichi could even respond, the door slid open and she stepped inside. She had brought his freshly washed clothes. As she handed them over, Yoichi felt this might be his chance. The question that had been bothering him all this time resurfaced, and he gathered the courage to speak. He told her he had something he wanted to ask, but before he could continue, faint sounds echoed from the next room. It was the couple. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Hana, completely unfazed, casually remarked that she had noticed something over time. Most couples who stayed there tended to get into a certain kind of mood. According to her, men seemed more energized, while women appeared even more radiant. Some locals even believed that couples who stayed there were blessed with children afterward. She admitted that cleaning up afterward could be a hassle, but at the same time she found it amusing how affectionate the couples always remained. Hearing that, Yoichi suddenly understood what she had meant earlier when she said she was used to such things. Then, without warning, Hana added something else. She casually mentioned that she had already figured out why he had been washing his briefs the day before, suggesting that maybe he had been thinking about something inappropriate involving her. Yoichi instantly denied it, flustered and defensive, insisting it wasn't like that at all. Hana only smiled slightly and brought the conversation back, asking about the favor he wanted to request. After a brief hesitation, Yoichi finally said it. He wanted to see her tongue. The request sounded strange even to his own ears, and Hana looked a bit puzzled, but without overthinking it, she agreed. Slowly, she stuck out her tongue. Yoichi's eyes focused immediately. There it was, a piercing, in the exact same place as the girl from the photo. His thoughts spiraled. Everything matched, and yet he still couldn't fully convince himself. Was it really the same person, or was it just a coincidence? Before he could reach any conclusion, Hana pulled back. Seemingly unconcerned, she turned and headed for the door. As she left, she casually remarked that he might want some privacy again, assuming he needed time for his own thoughts. And just like that, she stepped out, leaving Yoichi alone with even more confusion than before.